I gave this show a chance, it didn't deserve it. This is a terrible show and a worse Fallout show. I will prove this by splitting it up, reviewing the plot, fight scenes, and characters as if this were standalone, then pulling in the games at the end. The show is mostly chronological, but with flashbacks and lore drops throughout, so I'm going to be covering the story in timeline order to minimize any confusion. The theme of this video is decay, since by dumb luck 2 out of 3 of the first plot lines are actually the strongest. We start with the Ghoul, a veteran of the Battle of Anchorage and currently a big-name actor. He plays a morally upright sheriff and feels uncomfortable when he has to even act in immoral ways. People around him are losing their jobs for communist behavior, much like the Red Scare in the real Cold War. Ghoul has a wife in a prominent position at Vault-Tec and a daughter, unemployed. At his wife's request, the Ghoul does a photo shoot and commercial for Vault-Tec. Test subjects is shown in the commercial. Terrible advertising. Vault 4 is built and lived in near Hollywood. At the after party, we learn the Ghoul has a low opinion of Vault-Tec, and working with them has hurt his career as an actor, as the communists hate Vault-Tec. But this is despite people suspected of communism getting blacklisted. The show is trying to have it both ways. An argument with his wife reveals his fears of the war, and she lets slip that paid vaults are not a place you want to be. Ghoul meets up with a war buddy actor communist. He tells Ghoul Vault-Tec is evil, invested in killing the world. They need to do something about it, and he invites him to a meeting. Ghoul has another argument with his wife, this time about policy inside the vaults. The argument wasn't a screamfest and they made up in the end, but Ghoul still goes to the communist meeting. Despite people he knows and respects getting blacklisted for going to these meetings, despite everything it would do to his wife if he got caught. Since she was the one that got him involved in Vault-Tec, she would take the blame from the company. He never considered this could be a trap, either by a competitor or by the very people that he called a cult and that say Vault-Tec is evil. Ghoul walks out of the meeting, insulting communism, and somebody calls him a fascist. Commie leader is actually a millionaire researcher working on cold fusion until Vault-Tec bought and buried the nearly completed project. She says she's not a communist, but her followers and other dialogue kinda murky the waters. She gives him a bug to plant on his wife. Ghoul uses the bug's Bluetooth to connect to the first of its kind, apparently zero security, Pip-Boy, without even touching it. He changes his mind and throws out the bug, just to dig it out that night. He drops his wife off at work. She complains that her Pip-Boy is bugging out and constantly transmitting, but she can fix it herself. Bud talks to Ghoul, a civilian, in public, about his top-secret project in vague terms. Ghoul loses reception, so goes inside the building to wait for his wife. No security scanners, apparently, since he still has the bug. Ghoul's wife wore her compromised Pip-Boy to the meeting. 1. She didn't figure out how to fix it. 2. She didn't ask for help. 3. She brought it into a top-secret meeting. I've experienced in military and civilian secure areas. The relaxed ones allow approved watches. The strict ones don't even allow water bottles. This is a meeting with the largest companies in the country, but the wife, and Vault-Tec as a whole, have pathetic security. The wife is just one of 2 Vault-Tec representatives at the meeting of CEOs. The other is her boss, a guy that has full control of 3 vaults. So either she was lying to her husband, or someone this high up somehow still has no control of vault policy, like having a pet dog, for example. Not buying it. The wife tells the table Vault-Tec can guarantee investing in vaults will pay off if Vault-Tec themselves drop the first bomb. Okay, best faith interpretation is that Vault-Tec don't actually mean what they say. When speaking on investments, they actually mean holding on to power. Nuking potential customers isn't profitable. When characters say Vault-Tec has a duty to their investors and the world, and that's why they sabotage peace talks, that's wrong. If anything, they have a duty to keep the world on the brink of war to sell more vaults. This meeting, to be charitable, is to gain investments and sales from other companies. But those other companies have no incentive for the world to actually end. Again, resting on the brink is what makes them money, not going over the edge. The Ghoul meets Lucy's dad. There's a time skip as those flashbacks are saved for Season 2, and we get to the show's opening scene. The Ghoul is divorced, a known commie, and working birthday parties with his daughter, who hasn't aged up, so not much time has passed. The first bomb drops, but due to poor story writing, the daughter is the only person in a room full of people to see the flash. Also, she doesn't go blind, so I'm sure she's fine. The two get on the horse and take off down the road, leaving everyone else to fight over the bomb shelter and cars. It's pretty neat that you don't get to see any cars leaving, as the EMP would have fried them, and the visuals are very cool, I admit. But they take the exposed road facing the city. Not smart. Also, no missiles or bombs falling can be seen, so I guess all 4 of these were from Vault Tech. That's it for flashbacks. Not the worst, but seriously flawed. A level I'd expect from old Nicolas Cage movies. Now we're into the intermediate stage, the period post-war but before the start of the film. Mostly lore drops with the occasional flashback. We know the wife and daughter are alive, probably in a vault. Bud's buds, Vault Tech employees, went to Vault 31 into status. Managers would be woken up as needed to run Vaults 32 and 33. The Vault 4 uprising happens around 2100. 2142, Shady Sands is founded. 2189, NCR is founded. 2198, Shady Sands becomes the NCR capital. 2241, NCR becomes the dominant faction. 2277, Shady Sands falls. The history board tells us the nuke was dropped after 2277. Ideally after 2288, so New Vegas is still canon. So assuming the bomb went off right after the events of New Vegas, that would be 14 years ago. Using the shot of Lucy on the surface with her mom, she's old enough to remember her, but too young to remember details. And her height, that puts her at 4 to 6 years old, which would make her 18 to 20 when the show starts. That's the absolute oldest she can be, and New Vegas stays canon. Of course, that would also mean she was messing with her cousin since she was 8 or 10, since we know they've been doing that for 10 years. This also requires her to be an abnormally tall 4 to 6 year old, but any older and the lost memories don't make sense. In fact, how Lucy, Norm, and their mother, followed by their father, all leaving the vault with no one noticing makes very little sense. Let's backtrack again. 2282, Lucy's mom discovers a civilization exists above ground. She takes both her young children out to Shady Sands, then Lucy's father follows them to take the kids back. The mother stops near Shady Sands, and the father somehow nukes them. They still have nukes apparently. No one in the vault notices they're gone. The mother is capable of this task despite never seeing the surface before, and the father is capable of doing that, plus smuggling 2 kids out of the NCR capital despite never being in the post-war surface either. The commie leader is about the same age and present near Shady Sands at the time, and Max survived the nuclear blast by hiding in a fridge, didn't become a ghoul, and got rescued by a Brotherhood of Steel paladin who was in the NCR capital within hours. Vault 4 takes in a couple dozen survivors, and judging by what we see of the NCR later, the rest of the Republic crumbles over the next 14 years until only a handful remain. In 2294, Vault 32 find out the Vault experiment and kill the Overseer. Then, instead of doing literally anything else, like telling Vault 33 or just going to the surface or anything, they all just start killing each other until only 3 are left, who end up ending themselves. A couple more years pass with no contact from Vault 32, and then the Enclave events happen, I believe. It's kind of hard to tell, but the dog looks about 2 or 3 years old, so we'll plug it in here. An Enclave scientist sneaks a puppy from the lab to his room. Many people see this, so I guess they knew. He raises the dog in secret and works on Vault Tech's cold fusion prototype. He injects it into his neck as prep for smuggling it out. When recovering from this, a guy walks in and sees he's hiding a dog, which no one seemed to care about before that, but now they fight and he sounds the dog alarm, so the dog kills him. Very convenient that he was caught for something totally unrelated just after finishing his prep for smuggling cold fusion. Despite the alarm being triggered in his room, no one suspects him as he openly walks his dog out of the facility. Once outside, he runs past a turret, or walks past a turret. I guess cold fusion grants him insane plot armor as well. At about this time, probably a little after, the commie leader enters Vault 32 with a raider gang and we're caught up to the present. This period was rough. Worse than the pre-war section for sure. Many major events that don't make sense. Now our two options for timeline are that Enclave scientist was in secret contact with Commie Leader, so she got into Vault 32 to capture Lucy's dad for the cold fusion code while leaving Scientist to make his own way across Wasteland. That's a terrible plan, and we have nothing to suggest they were in contact. Or option 2, he escaped Enclave capture parties, somehow contacted her, she went to the vault under the assumption the Scientist would meet her later through a capture alive / transport bounty. That's much more likely, but still dumb. The vault isn't going anywhere. The Scientist is time sensitive and in danger. She leads what little remains of the NCR, a pathetic force when compared to an army, but much more capable of handling a Scientist escort mission. Also, she could have just picked up the Scientist from Philly on the way back, but chose not to because she's dumb. Genius millionaire communist, everybody. Meet our protagonist, Lucy. She's spec'd into intelligence, agility, speech build. A well-rounded jack-of-all-trades, master of none. Due to the small genetic pool, she's applying for an arranged marriage with Vault 32 during the triennial trade. Approved. So the Vaults only trade every 3 years, which is fine, but there is zero communication outside of emergencies. Otherwise, the Overseer and Council would know the vault was lost. No cameras either, otherwise Bud would know and inform 31 Overseer. Really weird that Bud is supposed to be in control of the vaults and organizing this, but he has zero cameras and no information except for what the Overseers tell him. Incredibly lucky that all these factors aligned for Commie Leader to move in just before the triennial trade. When Vault 33 meets Vault 32 raiders at the door, Lucy's dad, the Overseer, a pre-war manager in Bud's Buds, fails to recognize Commie Leader isn't one of his co-workers. No one recognized these aren't the same dwellers they met 3 years ago. If Commie Leader had brought her NCR remnants instead of raiders, they could have taken the Overseer here and now without excessive bloodshed and still have time to pick up the Scientist. Lucy's dad doesn't think a neck tattoo is anything to worry about in a corporate management-run vault. Norm, Lucy's brother, goes to Vault 32 after the wedding out of curiosity and discovers a body at the same time the attack starts. Lucy hears a scream and checks her husband with the Pip-Boy. The man that just finished inside her is giving off high radiation levels. Really weird that all those people wearing Pip-Boys standing around the vault to let the raiders in didn't see that either. I'm sure she's fine. They fight, she wins but is injured. The armory was cleaned out, so she grabs a non-lethal syringer as it's the only option left. They fight off the raiders, more on this later, and despite killing probably 2 people already, grabs a non-lethal again, even though there are several machine guns available. Commie Leader sets up a hostage scenario and forces the Overseer to choose 6 dwellers or his daughter. He chooses his daughter, but it was just mind games as they capture the Overseer and release all the hostages before blocking their exit with a cave-in. Now, technically at this point, to keep everything chronological, I'd have to start skipping back and forth with the Vault and Brotherhood of Steel and everyone else, but to keep things easier to follow, and because after Lucy leaves the Vault plotline stays very insular, as is the nature of Vaults, I'm just going to finish the Vault plot before moving on to the wider Wasteland. The Vault does clean up and holds a meeting. Lucy wants a search party to look for her dad, but the Council says no. Her brother Norm says they don't want to find the Overseer because then they can't be in charge anymore. Lucy enlists the help of her brother and Chet, doorman and lover, to leave the Vault herself with a non-lethal weapon again. Norm and Chet get punished for their role. Chet loses his job as doorman and doesn't take it very well. Norm is known as a bit of a slacker, so punishment is difficult considering they can't give him a more menial job than he already has. He offhand mentions punishment for captured raiders, and they assign him as delivery guy. A meeting is called. The Vault as a whole seems to be in favor of rehabilitating and integrating the raiders into Vault dwellers. We know the dwellers are selectively bred and raised to be docile so the management can keep control, which completely failed in Vault 32 somehow, which could go to explain why everyone is so naive. everyone but Lucy and Norm, who are children of a pre-war manager, and Steph, the pregnant pre-war manager. This level of docility tells me the Vault experiment failed. Norm suggests not rehabilitating them and instead just putting them down. The Vault doesn't like this idea. The meeting is interrupted by a maintenance guy, the water chip is broken, and the Vault will run out of water in 2 months, not counting the prisoners. The Vault gets distracted with an election to determine which council member becomes overseer. The 31 councilwoman has a chat with Norm and warns him to tread lightly. Chet and Steph mourn and hook up. Steph goes into labor. Norm is still doing his thing, making nice through soft bribes with the security desk. One of the raiders tells him they weren't responsible for 32. Norm takes Chet to go explore the Vault for themselves. That's when they learn the Vault died 2 years ago and the raiders used his mom's Pip-Boy. As they leave 31, Councilwoman asks where they were. They lie and say they were planting crops, even though they're covered in rock dust, not dirt. The Overseer vote occurs, total 31 victory. At this moment, Norm discovers every Vault 33 Overseer came from Vault 31, which he really should have known about already. And the new Overseer cleans up Vault 32 behind the scenes. It's a big vault and she's old, so to do that so quickly she needed help. Either getting security to do it in secret, which would expose them to how weird everything is, or getting 31 to wake up a bunch of managers to get their hands dirty. That sounds much more likely. The new Overseer takes the dwellers into Vault 32 so they can heal and rebuild. The vault is immaculate. Keep in mind, the raiders came through this vault and everybody already knows that. What you're trying to hide are the 2-year-old bodies and blood messages. Anything that would stand out, not just damage. Repainting and fixing everything in such a short time would require so many vault residents that the reveal would be meaningless. If they didn't send teams of cleaners, but the vault still looks as nice as it does, then people may become suspicious as the raiders didn't break anything when they were there, apparently. Also, since people are moving here, they should be the ones fixing it up. Putting work into something connects them to it, helps endear them to their new home. Days pass. The raiders get poisoned. The security Norm was sweetening up gets arrested for it. But the big 3 suspects are Overseer, Steph, and Norm. Overseer is most likely, but I really like the idea of Norm doing it, and we just don't know. The dwellers split, with half being assigned to Vault 32. Remember how the water chip was damaged? That was never addressed, and now the second vault can't be used as spare parts. I suspect the water chip was sabotaged to stress the dwellers so they vote for 31 Overseer due to a crisis, although many people already died and they had prisoners, so stress was already high, and a broken vital system, regardless of why it's broken, needs to be addressed. But it never is. It's totally forgotten, and it doesn't come up again. Norm uses the personnel transfer to Vault 32 as a distraction to get into the Overseer's office. The Overseer suspects him already. The rock dust, he's not a purebred docile, the tread lightly comment. But the Overseer never locked her door. Dumb. At least the computer needs a hacking skill, but Norm worked with computers and the Overseer already knows this. She should have locked the door. Norm breaks in and sends a message to Vault 31. Tricking them into opening the big vault door to 31. Norm meets Bud, the robo-brain controlling the 3 vaults, and Bud gives the big reveal, then locks the door so Norm can't leave. His choice is to starve or stasis himself for safekeeping. Or threaten to smush Bud's brain unless he opens the door, but Bud won't tell him that. The vault subplot is my favorite part of the show. It's got problems like the water chip and the lack of security. Bud wants to control humanity, but has no cameras to watch. But I find the experiment interesting. I like seeing how people bred to be docile respond to stress next to someone who isn't, and I like Norm as a character. Now for the rest of the story. There's multiple arcs and people move around, so we really need a map. A little foreshadowing, but locations in the show are different than the games, so we can't use a game map, we have to make our own. It will be really inaccurate, as even when they do give us landmarks or counties, it doesn't always match the topography. But this will at least give us a sense of world and help follow the characters. When Lucy's dad gets kidnapped, we move to the Brotherhood of Steel. Maximus is our secondary protagonist getting his ass beat. He is training to be a squire, an assistant to the armored knights. The goal of the Brotherhood of Steel is to take territory and pre-war tech. Poor Max can't tell the difference between a rotor and a circuit, the equivalent of an illiterate librarian. Max is a hard worker, but nobody likes him, and he's very dumb. So when his only friend gets promoted as squire and he doesn't, he's not happy for him, he throws a hissy fit. The next morning, Max's friend is hurt and he runs to help, then gets blamed for it. We know they did it to themselves, but Max does everything in his power to self-incriminate. Quote, "I wanted it to happen. Is that wrong?" The cleric says violence against allies is weakness, which is weird considering ranking Brotherhood of Steel saw students beating up Max and did nothing. He asks Max if he is weak, and Max replies that he doesn't want to be, which really sounds like he did it. Max swears loyalty and gets promoted as squire. I have no idea why. Max sounds crazy untrustworthy right now, but, whatever. The Brotherhood has heard of the Enclave scientist's escape and are on their way to find him first. Now for the ghoul. At some coastal defense that I couldn't find after an hour of scanning Google Maps, 3 guys fight their way into a graveyard. The ghoul is in a grave with anti-feral meds hooked up by a warlord with a grudge. In case he went feral, since I guess they don't trust the drugs, they're opening the coffin with a pull rope and a chicken set up as bait. They want his help collecting a bounty on Enclave scientist. That bounty got posted that very night. The ghoul is rude to his rescuers. They don't take it well. The ghoul pulls the coffin rope, which somehow bounds and gags the guy in a single pull. Then he kills his buddies, then him. Lucy leaves the vault, experiences some atmospheric storytelling, and settles down for the night. By some insane coincidence, the Enclave scientist shows up and saves her life. Even more lucky, because if the timing was just slightly different, the commie leader could have picked up the scientist at the same trip. The scientist tells her to go home and wanders off into the night. Next morning, we're with the Brotherhood of Steel again. Knight Titties is being rude and decides to drop early and off mission because he's bored and wants to shoot something. Dumb. By dumb luck, again, they stumble across a rest stop the scientist made and for some reason left a shirt at. The knight orders Max into the cave as bait and the Yaogwai gets the drop on the knight. He runs away, gets caught, and the bear chews on his chest plate and belly a little bit before Max kills it with a pistol shot to the head. We hear 2 shots, but we only see 1 impact, so apparently that's all it took to take the bear out, but the power-armored knight couldn't do it. The suit is not punctured or deformed, just a scratched chest plate, so we're left to assume the shaking hurt him, I guess? The knight complains about danger in the Wasteland, despite coming here specifically because he wanted to shoot something. The knight is also dying, and he blames Max. He tells him that after Max heals him with a stim pack, Max will be hung for incompetence. He really must have suffered some serious head trauma to think that was a smart thing to say. Max lets him die, obviously, and takes the armor. If they didn't stop early for no reason, then the Brotherhood of Steel would have gotten to the scientists first. Lucy meets a farmer, kind of. He has 3 potato plants and is in a desert. Half a mile away are woodlands, but he's too scared of the town over the hill to move there to wherever that water is. Half a mile away makes him safe, I guess. But he has no water and is so dumb that he thinks putting sand in a water filter will give him anything but sand. He is too dumb to exist. If he can survive the surface, anyone can. Kills the stakes. Lucy goes to the town of Philly. Max tests out his new armor and breaks up a fight between a chicken farmer and a chicken fucker, tale as old as time, and continues to Philly. Notice how powerful that suit is, yet less effective than a pistol. Lucy goes into Philly looking for a commie leader and gets in an argument with the shopkeep. When she gets kicked out, the Enclave scientist walks in. The scientist that had a head start in the middle of the night and knew where he was going was beaten to Philly by a vault dweller just randomly guessing a direction and a ghoul that was only released that very night. The world traveling is non-Euclidean. The scientist reveals that he knows all about Vault 33 and the shopkeep ushers him inside. The ghoul makes his introduction and tells the whole town of dangerous people that the scientist is worth a lot of money. He is creating problems for himself for no reason. He shoots the scientist's foot off so he can't run and a fight scene breaks out, which I will talk about later. The fight ends, Lucy tries to trank him but it doesn't work because he smokes a lot of meth, relatable. Max flies in, more on that later. The ghoul tries to shoot Lucy but Max uses his 2-ton suit to tackle her through a wall. We know he isn't good with the armor yet, so this could have just easily killed her instead of tackling the guy with a gun, who was closer. Max lifts his visor, while in combat, so he can chit-chat with the pretty girl. The fight continues with Max shooting a different pistol than the one he used earlier, so he has 2 guns, keep that in mind for later. The fight goes on for a while, the ghoul knows how to one-shot power armor, but doesn't here for some reason. The armor is heavy enough to break through wooden planks, but too weak to pull it out despite being able to kick rocks through buildings. The ghoul cuts the respirator tube, which somehow makes him lose control despite being able to operate the armor without a helmet. He zooms around and crashes face first at 50 miles per hour. Not dead. I guess a Yao Guai shaking night titties like a disobedient toddler is more dangerous than a high-speed collision. During the fight, they put a meat grinder prosthetic on the scientist. I said it about Rebel Moon and it holds true here. If a cheaper, more effective product exists today than the sci-fi version, that sci-fi item shouldn't exist. A pirate's peg leg would be better here. This is stupid for shock value, and unfortunately plot as well. Lucy agrees to transfer scientists to Commie Leader as a bargaining chip for her dad, gets a map marker, and takes off, without grabbing a weapon. They get as far as the desert, in the same day. If a night passed, Lucy would be asking questions about what the scientist knows, and he would have no reason not to tell her. So, same day. They stop, he cyanides himself and tells Lucy she needs to take his head, not just the little device from his head that could easily be hidden. Can't hide a head in your prison wallet. Ghoul saves the dog with a stim pack, who is now instantly friendly with him, which is not how dogs work, and waits until night to go after the scientist, presumably using the dog as a tracker. Lucy continued her journey and rests for the night. She finds the cold fusion device but leaves it there because scientists never told her it was there or how to store it. But since it was stored in his neck, I'm sure it's fine in her pocket. She puts a tracker in the head in case she loses it. Finally something smart. Lucy has a huge head start over the ghoul and Max, by the way. Max props his armor up, just outside of town, and takes a call from the Brotherhood of Steel. He pretends to be night titties and tells them that he died. A short-term and dumb choice, so in character. They send him a replacement scribe. Max panics and breaks his mic. Again, short-term and dumb, in character. Max enters the town again to get a part repaired. Max spent the whole night just outside of town in his busted armor and the ghoul just passed him by without putting him down. So, out of character for the ghoul, I guess? Max sells a tooth to afford the repair, and when he returns, some scavengers are trying to steal his armor. That second gun he had vanished into the void or abandoned at the Yao Guai cave for no reason, again. Because of Max's continued stupidity, he gets into a fistfight instead of just shooting them. The Brotherhood of Steel drop off a replacement scribe, Max's bully. Max considers killing him, but is amused by his pleas for mercy. Lucy makes it to a river and gets the head stolen by a gulper. The ghoul fucking teleports across the desert and captures Lucy. Uses her as bait to get the gulper, which works so well that it bites the hook anchor instead of her. The ghoul somehow succeeds in pulling it out of the water, but he doesn't shoot it, just pokes it with a stick a few times until it slaps him away, and the gulper chooses not to drag Lucy back into the water. Lucy smacks it with the ghoul's bag, the dog bites it, so it leaves. The ghoul's anti-feral drugs are gone, so he abandons the head, and the dog for some reason, to take Lucy to Walmart. Max continues to abuse his scribe for amusement in the desert. Max is a good guy, by the way. The scribe says they can track the ghoul using a directional radiac. So until now, they had no idea where to go and Max was just bullying him? This radiac can find a single ghoul from miles away by the radiation it emits? This is a post-nuclear world. No way. The amount of radiation he would need to emit to overpower the other sources in the world, or even just the background radiation from miles away, would have fried the whole town he spent hours in, and the dog, and Lucy. That radiac is nothing more than a magical plot device. They make the whole trip Lucy did, but in less than a day, because distance is eldritch nonsense in this show. When the Gulper attacks, Max tells his scribe to run. The scribe shoots the Gulper, only once with a full auto for some reason. The Gulper tries eating the scribe, Max plays tug of war without breaking the scribe's arms, and the Gulper dies. Now he has the head and the dog. Ghoul takes a detour to meet a ghoul that ran out of anti-feral meds. Mercy kills him, cannibalizes him, then forces Lucy to cut the meat. Lucy drinks some dirty water, bites one of Ghoul's fingers off, he cuts one of hers off, sells her for antiviral meds, and collapses. So he was that close to collapsing from lack of medication, but still detoured to meet an old buddy and have a little snack. And 2 months of vials is what he's getting, 60 vials, so now we know 1 vial a day or you go psycho. Lucy meets the Mr. Handy that thinks it's worth replacing her finger before harvesting her organs, because I guess Sepsis just improves the flavor. But it actually works just as well as her old finger. There are no long-term consequences from the shock value. Lucy gets tranked but wakes up before anything happens, convenient, but is still tied up, but just the arms. We meet 2 utter retards that are somehow also smart enough to run an organ and feral vial operation. The Mr. Handy does the surgeries, but these 2 run the business. Why does everyone in this show have to be an idiot? Lucy escapes and fries a robot, then soft reprograms it and fills its tranks with acid. I guess she learned how to do that in a manual? There's no bots in Vault 33. Lucy holds the robot hostage and threatens the owners, who didn't care about the robot despite it being vital to their business. How do you characterize organ smugglers this dumb and this lazy? Lucy forces the business owners to release everyone including the ferals. The 3 ferals and 2 stoners all kill each other off, so only Lucy remains. How lucky is that? I should mention that one of the ferals got shot in the shoulder-chest area and died. So when the ghoul stood in the middle of Philly and got shot, he didn't survive because he was a ghoul, he survived because he's a main character. Lucy gives the cannibal slave trader some vials and she leaves. The ghoul goes on a drug bender, throwing around life-saving glass vials with reckless abandon. Passes out, and when he wakes up gets arrested by wannabe cop LARPers running a protection racket because they blame him for killing the 2 mouth-breathing smugglers. Max and Squire are celebrating under an overpass. No idea why they're here and didn't just return to Philly. The plot needed them closer to Lucy, I guess. When Max reveals his face, instead of saying the original knight got killed by a Yaogwai, which is true, he says he's dead. They need to get their stories straight, and no one needs to know. 1 speech, 1 intelligence, why the fuck is this guy in the show? Max steps on his foot, then gets his power armor core removed, locking him in the armor. Terrible design. The Squire takes the head, dog, and walks away on his pancake foot, the foot that got stomped on by a 2-ton suit. Max is trapped until morning, but by pure luck, again, Lucy appears. Lucy is following the tracker in the head that left last night. It is incredibly unlikely that she would come through the same underpass Max is stuck in. She lets him out. She knows how because Vault-Tec had T60 manuals lying around. Just like the Mr. Handy manuals, I guess. Can't wait until the Vertibird manuals come into play. Max gives her rat away and they agree to work together. Max gets ahead, Lucy gets her dad. As they walk, they talk. Lucy says the Brotherhood mission statement is dumb and gets no pushback from Max. Now, the show's Brotherhood of Steel is real dumb and Max has been through a lot the last few days. Plus, he can't tell the difference between a rotor and a circuit, but even with all that, he was loyal for 14 years and he can't explain the mission statement? The 2 come to a bridge with 2 fiends on the other side. It's tense, but Lucy keeps things peaceful until they meet in the middle and the fiends draw on them. Max kills them both but catches a round in the arm. Somehow following the tracker brought them through Shady Sands. Whatever path the scribe is taking makes no sense. I get that my map is inaccurate, but what possible reason would a footless man have for going this way? Into the dead city. When at the NCR crater, Max's arm finally remembers it's been shot, so they walk into the nearest medical building and fall into a trap. Are you tired of luck yet? Welcome to Vault 4, Episode 6 with a little carryover into 7 and some of the dumbest shit I have ever seen. It could have all been cut without affecting the rest of the show, radioactive filler that is painful to sit through. While people being stupid or lucky has driven a lot of the plot so far, this ramps it up to a level I have never seen before. Vault 4 ran human experimentation for 20 years or so until the test subjects rebelled, but they still have the trap door installed. The at-risk test subjects are in stasis pods on level 12 until they can be saved. But with the torture equipment still set up almost 200 years after the rebellion. The only reason it's still there is so Lucy can think they're bad guys. Keep that in mind as we go through this. Max and Lucy get disarmed and free medical care, told to stay a couple days while Max heals, and are told a significant amount of the population are Shady Sands refugees. They're also told that they found the abandoned 2-ton power armor and dragged it into the vault. No idea how they did that or how they found it so quickly. The plot needs that armor in the vault, though. While they sit in quarantine, we get this dialogue. Do you want to have sex? You mean use my cock? Yeah. That weird thing could happen. For some guys, not me. When they make it move, it gets all big and hard like a big pimple, and then it pops. They say it can happen to anybody. It's gross. Okay, that horrible dialogue is followed by Max saying knights are supposed to be celibate. That's new, whatever. But I absolutely refuse to believe that any Brotherhood of Steel member with a higher IQ than an 8-year-old would say these lines. There was a scene in the Brotherhood of Steel barracks of a guy jerking off under the blanket while Max was still in the room. Did he think he was popping pimples? Those lines were included for comedy, I guess, but it makes me seriously consider if Max has a learning disability. They eat. Max wants to leave because they're wasting time, calls his place a cult. Lucy won't leave until Max is fully recovered. The overseer shows up and tells him not to go to level 12, and if you don't know how to flush a toilet, ask first. Lucy is freaked out by the Cyclops in level 12, while Max, he was raised by a faction that hates mutants. Max doesn't care. Lucy talks to the overseer, who complains about service people. He only does it because it's company policy. When she asks about level 12, he kicks her out. Max goes to the generator room to steal a fusion core for his armor, but is interrupted, given a Pip-Boy and a room. There's a gift basket to convince him to stay, which completely works because he's a fucking toddler. Lucy walks into a classroom, that's where we learned of the whole nuking Shady Sands timeline fiasco, and gets invited to an NCR ritual. They worship Kami Leader as a revenge god. The roles are reversed now. Lucy wants to leave, but Max doesn't because they gave me a robe and slippers. So Lucy goes to level 12 to get proof. Vault 4 are the good guys, remember. Even if they don't give a reason for why they keep a face in a jar, I'm sure they have one. She watches a horrific video of a woman giving birth to gulpers that then eat her, and Lucy moves on to the stasis room. A scientist doing normal rounds walks in, hears Lucy make a sound, and triggers the alarm. So just to clarify, they brought 2 strangers into the vault unvetted, gave them free roam of the place, didn't lock any doors, and if they go to level 12 they get kicked out, all while being as suspicious as possible instead of just telling the truth. The specimen control unit isn't a tranq gun for the pregnant women they're protecting, or even a shotgun for baby gulpers. It's a fucking harpoon. In the 200 years since Rebellion, they haven't changed anything about the lab, and a team of geneticists couldn't figure out how to perform an abortion. 14-year-olds with a medicine cabinet have figured that shit out. I'm guessing the reason the writers made it 200 years was just so the family in the commercial would be the same ones on the final tape. Lucy throws acid at one, gets captured, gets shown the tape, and apologizes. They act all smug and superior despite their stupidity. They even call her ignorant, after refusing to tell her about level 12. They drag her away. Max sees this and acts. It is nuts how hard you have to railroad this character into doing something smart. The Vault Dwellers, on the other hand, who know they are friends and he's Brotherhood of Steel, do nothing to stop him. Max goes to the power room to steal a fusion core. Silly me thought this was a station that recharged cores, but no, the same core that powers an entire vault also powers Power Armor and Mr. Handy's. This is the only scene of Max that I actually like. An idiot with a sledgehammer suddenly becomes a superhero when unleashed on stuff that deserves to get broken. They sentence Lucy to death, but it's death by banishment to the surface. With supplies. A cheap fake out for comedy. This entire vault was a cheap fake out. Lucy thanks them and is in the middle of asking if Max can stay when the power flickers and our broken clock marches in. But unfortunately, Lucy stops him before he can start painting the walls red, and they leave. Lucy convinces Max to give the idiots their fusion core back. Max tells Lucy he let his knight die. Lucy invites him to stay in her vault. Max agrees. Also, Lucy says she's been on the surface 2 weeks. I have no idea what's going on with the timeline. Sorcery. I wanted to knock out Vault 4 ASAP, I'm sure you understand. The ghoul is taken to the mob boss controlling the protection racket. So rich he's fat in Wasteland, and his goons have unarmored, cleaned, and pressed uniforms somehow. They untie the ghoul so he can stitch his finger back on. Dumb. Which works perfectly, of course. No permanent repercussions for him either. The ghoul intentionally enrages a goon, so the boss orders him to disarm, also dumb. Then the ghoul kills them, drops his guns while the boss is still alive, and then questions the boss, now unarmed, on the commie leader. Episode 7 opens with 2 guys in ranger armor. Looks nasty. Collecting metal, then going home and seeing the ghoul. The father calls for his daughter, no answer, and the ghoul makes a big show of eating meat. But it's a fake out. The ghoul killed an NCR guy off screen, the father's second son, and picked a letter off his corpse that said the surviving son paid for the Enclave scientist's escort. That is much more convoluted than just picking up the scientist on your way back from Vault 33. And this whole process was done in a very short amount of time, assuming the scientist wasn't already in communication with the NCR leader. Whatever. The father and the ghoul already know each other. Convenient, but changes nothing. The ghoul didn't need to say he killed his son, but he did. The son tells him where the commie leader is. Ghoul baits the son into reaching for a gun, so he shoots him. He did this so the son wouldn't seek revenge once he leaves. So now that the son is dead, the ghoul has killed both the father's sons, and he leaves. Because he's an idiot. The squire has been walking aimlessly for a few days now with a slight limp, despite his foot being destroyed. He puts the dog in a box to die for the crime of slight annoyance, leaves a heavy bag behind, and turns on the radio. Now he's going to use it to get to the station and call the Brotherhood. So he really was just walking in circles before this. The chicken fucker's having a day, but he crosses paths with Scribe. Which, yes, is convenient for the plot, but also this guy was never really plot relevant before and is known to travel, so I'm more okay with this one. No excuses for the rest. He trades a cure-all for the fusion core, which actually works and closes the foot wound, mostly. It also turned him into a ghoul, but Scribe doesn't know that yet. On the way to the commie leader, the ghoul finds a dog. I've said convenience and luck so many times they don't sound like real words anymore. Squire makes it to the radio station and sends his message. He avoided all the booby traps, keep that in mind, and the radio guy, despite the city being gone and everyone hating him, manages full-time survive in the Wasteland, full-time keep the tower powered, and full-time running it. Squire empties his gun on Max and Lucy and misses because haha funny despite hitting the gulper first shot at greater distance. Max and Lucy don't have the 2 weeks supplies given to them by Vault 4 for some reason. Squire steps back and triggers a trap. Since he doesn't die and regenerates when pulling it out, he knows he's a ghoul. Very lucky for Max and Lucy since the Brotherhood of Steel hate ghouls. Now he gives them the head and runs away. Max smushes a decoy head and has Lucy run off with the real one, but they smooch for so long that as she's leaving vertibirds can be heard overhead, so they definitely saw her. Also, both Squire and Lucy ran out without hitting any booby traps. Traps only trigger when the plot needs them to. Then Max runs off through the booby traps too. Max is taken to Philly. The Brotherhood took the place and shot some people. They find it suspicious that Knight Titties is dead. They test the head and it's fake, so they move to execute him and he immediately flips and leads them straight to Lucy. Max's friend admits they hurt their own foot to save Max. It works. Max says Titties died like a pussy. cleric says Max should be his second in command. I don't care if you think his dead knight was justified. He just admitted to betraying the Brotherhood by bringing a fake. Why would you do this? Max's master plan is to save Lucy by sending the Brotherhood of Steel at her and turning it into a war zone, then running away together. This is cope. If that was the plan, why bring the fake head at all and risk getting executed? Just show up with no head and say Scribe Ghoul took it or something. Honestly, just running into the woods of the radio tower is starting to sound safer. Also, Max doesn't get power armor even though he's supposed to become second in command. Now, the cleric could have been lying to him, but so much of this show has been driven by stupidity that I don't believe that. Lucy arrives, commie leader gets cold fusion and lore dumps everything I explained in the period between the bombs dropping and Lucy leaving the vault. Lucy tells Dad to give the code, he does, commie leader starts cold fusion, then the Brotherhood attack. We get a shot of dead knights that brings me joy, but the choreography overall is fucking horrendous. The ghoul got in somehow with no one seeing him, and the Brotherhood units wait patiently for him to pull his one-shot kill trick that he didn't use on Max for some reason. He cuts the power and all the knights forget their helmets have lights on them, but the ghoul must have night vision because he just keeps hitting weak points. The door opens and a headless corpse walks in. The first time in recorded history that's happened, but the plot needed power armor in this room, so there it is. Max walks in and Lucy doesn't stop him from freeing her dad, only telling him after he's out what her father did. Max fucking dies. Ghoul walks in and asks where his family is. Lucy's dad flies away, with no helmet. So when Max's helmet tube was cut and he lost control, I guess that really was bullshit after all. Ghoul says he didn't kill him so he can follow him and find out who's really in charge. No tracker though, so how? In the background we can see explosions, so I guess the fighting is happening out there too? This doesn't make any sense. Ghoul and Lucy team up. I give it 5 minutes before he sells her for a Klondike bar. Max wakes up, commie leader walks in and dies, Max is declared Big Dick Energy, and the season ends with Lucy's dad walking to New Vegas. The plot starts out passable with pre-war section, is pretty good with Vault 33 once Lucy leaves, and plummets into convenience, contradiction, and dependence on character stupidity. The show is primarily split across 5 plots: pre-war, Ghoul, Max, Lucy, and Vault 33, so each episode will move between different areas. This helps the pacing and saving the reveals for the end, but I suspect it also causes some of the more casual viewers to glaze over the problems. That's why I took the time to explain the plot in timeline order, to remove the distractions and tell it plainly, so you can see what I see. Let's look at characters, starting with the best, Norm. In a vault where all the inhabitants are bred and raised to be docile, Norm is a half-breed with a pre-war father. He's a self-admitted coward, so takes his friend Chet with him on his investigations, but as time goes on, he gets more confident, and the suspicion that drives him ends with him taking those risks on his own. Lucy, a naive jack-of-all-trades character that always tries to do the right thing and adopts the Wasteland. But she sliced someone's face and never mentioned it after the fact, allows a tranked raider to tumble headfirst off a balcony, and shoots someone in the eye. None of those actions are unjustified. But Lucy's lack of reaction to this and still choosing a non-lethal later doesn't make sense. She was justified in killing the raiders. If she had no qualms with that, she should have grabbed a lethal. If she did feel bad about it, she should have acted like it. The reaction we get from her is shock during the fight, but no regret or self-reflection afterwards. Other than that, her unjustified knowledge of power armor and Mr. Handy programming is annoying. When she first sees power armor, she asks if that's a knight, despite never hearing of the Brotherhood of Steel, and feeling any guilt about Vault 4 is silly. But besides just little whoopsie forgetting friends and family dying and that she's killed people, sabotaging her arc, I guess she's an alright character. The Ghoul. Veteran, father, actor, bounty hunter. He cares about his family and tries to stay out of politics and controversy unless it involves his family. Like doing a commercial on his wife's request and investigating Vault Tech because his wife's involved. He treats coworkers corporate nice and most others as customers, but doesn't seem to care about others outside his family or maybe an old war buddy. After the bomb's dropped, he loses any sense of self-preservation in fight scenes and will toy with people until he can justify killing them to himself. He's evil through and through. He didn't want to be seen negatively and didn't want the world to end, but that's about it. If you think Lucy cracked his shell and softened him up by giving him medication when she had no selfish reason to, or petting the dog shows growth, between those two events he was playing cannibal mind games and shot a man's son in front of him. I guess that doesn't mean he's a terrible character. It just wasn't a redemption arc, so don't look at things like that. It looks like they tried to push for a redemption arc. Max. He was raised in Shady Sands until he was 8-ish, then by the Brotherhood of Steel until 22-ish. Raised by a religious military organization with a focus on technology, can't tell the difference between a rotor and a circuit. He has an 8-year-old's understanding of sex, despite other guys around him knowing this stuff, like the barracks masturbator. He spent 14 years getting indoctrinated by mutant haters and was suspicious of Vault 4, but then didn't care that they were mutants. In fact, for such a ritualistic faction, none of the trainees act particularly weird, and the higher-ups don't seem to care. And Max, who was raised by the cult, breaks free pretty quick. It's been a rough few days, but hard enough to break 14 pages of conditioning. The whole goal of the Brotherhood of Steel is to keep technology out of the wrong hands to prevent another apocalypse. But he doesn't care about the head outside of its MacGuffin status. As soon as he breaks from them, he doesn't care who gets it. All his ingrained principles disregarded overnight. Max self-incriminates a lot. Said he wanted his friend to get hurt. Told the scribe they have to get their stories straight. Immediately confessed that he knew the head was a fake. Max's only redeeming quality was choosing violence in Vault 4. And, sure, saving the squire from the gulper. I'll give him that one. I hate Max so much. The fight choreography. I've done a few videos where I talk about it, so this isn't a new position I just made up for this show, alright? Choreography done well adds characterization and can increase the stakes because it feels more real. When done poorly, it can also add unintentional characterization and reduces the stakes, as we know any threat against the characters can be hand-waved away by the attacker intentionally missing or some other such nonsense. The fights in Fallout start out pretty good, actually. The Raider misses a few opportunities to stab Lucy, but they both play to their strengths. It's a close fight, and Lucy doesn't walk away unscathed. Then we get a mess in the open farming area. People just standing around and not getting hit. People about to get shot, but the scene cuts and they're fine. Baddies being incompetent and killing each other, and the crowning jewel. 2 idiots bringing cake despite the alarms, and they get told to take it back instead of, we're under attack. Really bad. But at least we see some teamwork. I always like to see that. I already touched on the ghoul intro and the magic rope, and the Enclave scientist fast walking through turret fire makes turrets non-threats. The power armor Yao Guai just trade blows and give each other time to recover instead of actually going for each other. The Philly fight, the ghoul stands out in the open, gets shot, doesn't react. If he's wearing armor, which it doesn't look like, he's still not wearing a helmet. Any gunfight involving the ghoul has lost its stakes. Once Max shows up, the ghoul can one-shot him at any time, but doesn't. And Max throws him around instead of stomping on him, even after knowing punching him wouldn't work. They are playing in Philly, not trying to kill each other. The scavenger fight went okay, but people don't try to block attacks. And he should have a gun, so it's all goof. I already spoke on the Gulper fight. It doesn't drag Lucy into the water, and the ghoul pokes it with a stick instead of shooting it. After smashing Scribe's foot, Max turns around for no reason at all, just so he can get his fusion core removed. Standing on his pancaked foot, too. Bridge scene is good. LARP scene has bad setup, but it's fine. Vault 4 fight is saved with the context that the idiots aren't actually trying to hurt her. And the Vault 4 power armor scene, guards running towards them, makes sense when you remember that they're all at risk of drowning in their own spit if they look up for too long. The final battle. I'm gonna leave this screenshot up for 5 seconds. Guess what I'm gonna say. Why are people with guns running to melee range? This is a cult mechanized army against the last remnants of a fallen nation. They're both fighting with flagpoles or standing out in the open, allergic to cover. When the Brotherhood of Steel first entered, they let the cannon fodder run in before the walking cover, which Max actually corrects later, which is good, but downright against his character of eating lead chips. The NCR are just as bad because when they do choose to use cover, they get behind upright picnic tables. Of all the fights, the last one was the worst, but not by much. The bridge scene is probably the best and well set up, but the fight itself only lasts seconds. Some final miscellaneous stuff before the finale. Several fight scenes play cheery old music that distracts and hurts the tone. It's supposed to be an eerie dark reflection or something, but when Lucy watches people she's known her whole life get cut to pieces by their own stupidity mixed with the music, it kills the tragedy. Makes it so hard to take these scenes seriously. The props are very well made. The visual effects are stunning, if dumb. The audio effects are good, but the ghoul yodel was really annoying. Allow me a minute of narcissism. I made an unscripted trailer rant, got a couple things wrong, and failed to clearly explain my points. That's on me. I received some good feedback in the comments, and while I still wasn't optimistic, I was ready to get proven wrong. That did not happen. I just went through the whole show as if it were a standalone, separate from any previous works, and it is horrible. Now let's consider those previous works. What did they change? What did they do that's impact has changed with the greater context? Starting small, Mr. House in New Vegas knew the end was coming and prepared for it as far back as 12 years beforehand, while in the show he called it a bad investment and had to be convinced. This takes away from his accomplishments and intellect. The show confirms, or at the very least heavily implies, that Vault-Tec is responsible for the war. In the games, it was officially China, but theorized to be the US or an Enclave inside job or Vault-Tec or PAM or any other number of groups. This was cool because it showed the world was on the brink and multiple groups could have pushed things over the edge. If it wasn't Vault-Tec, it would be the Enclave. If it wasn't the Enclave, it would be PAM, etc., etc. It adds a sense of inevitability that demonstrates how bad things were. By confirming the Vault-Tec theory, it dampens the fun by removing the mystery, but more importantly, the show implies, by outright saying they'll drop the bomb, that Vault-Tec sabotaged the peace talks. That changes the perception of how bad things were. Ghouls. The show introduces a drug that needs to be taken daily to prevent ghouls from going feral. A drug that's highly implied to be from people or ghouls. So any ghoul you meet in Megaton, Diamond City, serving in the Rangers, or at any of your settlements is actually taking anti-feral meds every day when you aren't watching. Any ghoul in an isolated location, on a long journey, or excluded from settlements are now on the verge of going feral, or just don't exist anymore, I guess. I don't know, trying to fit this new lore into old games is difficult at best, and accidentally justifies a lot of anti-ghoul racism in those factions. The show also tells us ghouls could reattach missing limbs and regenerate injuries in real time outside of radiation areas. Prosthetics don't play a big role in Fallout, any actually that I'm aware of, so while it's fair to be annoyed, it doesn't really affect anything. Regeneration is a gameplay mechanic though, but only in radiation areas. It's part of tactics to draw ghouls away from hotspots before engaging, or your weapon selection. It also nullifies the Glowing One special healing AoE ability. It also makes base level ghouls a bigger threat than base level people. But again, the show is not consistent on this. The show confirms the ghouls don't need food retcon, which is a whole thing, but the short version is Fallout 4 has a now infamous kid in a fridge mission where a pre-war child hid in a fridge, turned ghoul, and was stuck for 210 years and still a child. I guess he had 76,000 anti-feral meds on him. That side quest was weird because ghoul settlers still required food and water. My best guess explanation is that when ghouls aren't moving, they can enter a sort of hibernation state. A stretch considering bears lose 15% of body weight at each winter. What's really odd is that Bethesda has to be aware of the controversy but still showed Child Max stepping out of a fridge post-nuke about 6 times. Which, by the way, fridge vent is open, so he should be a ghoul, or dead, assuming the blast didn't kill him. Little funny because New Vegas actually made a joke about this in a Wild Wasteland Crystal Skull reference. Power armor. The flip-up visor. I hold the same position that I did in my trailer soy rant, but I'll try to explain myself better here. Obviously, the change was made so audiences could see the actor's face while in the armor. I haven't even heard anyone that supports the change argue against that. V for Vendetta, the focus character, never showed his face, and it's an iconic character. And The Mandalorian had many flaws, but people generally liked the fact that the actor could emote with body language and voice tone, and were fine with him leaving the helmet on. It was a cool gimmick. From a mechanical, logical perspective, the change to a visor brings more cons than pros. As a general rule, the more moving parts and sealing surfaces something has, the more points of failure exist. The helmet has a built-in respirator, good for chemical weapons, good for disease when fighting mutants, good for radiation contamination when in the Wasteland. Real-world gas masks limit the openings to be as small and limited in number as possible, typically just the threads of the filter and the internals of the exhale check valve. A full face opening held shut by a mechanical system is a major leak weakness, especially considering how often O-rings fail and that they have a shelf life. The thickness is lacking, likely to allow the internal motor to move it up and down. The suit is designed for combat, though. The flip visor reduces its effectiveness, meaning rounds that wouldn't puncture the original helmet are more likely to puncture this one. The game showed a helmet getting taken on and off. Any situation that requires you to lift a face visor can be achieved by removing the helmet. From an aesthetics artsy perspective, the armor is bulky, strong, thick, solid. The comparatively delicate flip visor stands out and clashes with the vibe, like a polka dot tie on a formal dress suit. It just looks bad. And similar to that, the hand thrusters. In Fallout 4 introduced jetpacks, bulky things that mount on the back of the armor. Much more plausible that they'd actually lift the power armor suit than the dainty hand thrusters, and the big ones fit the sturdy vibe better. That is to say, the hand thrusters look bad. Power armor fusion cores. This bit's funny because it's almost a return to norm. Fallout traditionally had fusion cores last the life of the armor and non-removable, but Fallout 4 gave them short capabilities to nerf the armor since they give you one in the first mission. This was heavily criticized and made a lot of people, including me, just never use power armor. The show reversed this change, much to my amusement, but they made another one as well. In Fallout 4, when the core is removed, the suit opens to allow the user to escape. This is how all my settlements have Stolen Raider power armor. It's also just a common sense safety feature. The show loses this feature for no reason other than the plot needed it to happen. Now for the bigger stuff. Brotherhood of Steel. In West Coast games, they were a xenophobic faction that had the primary goal of collecting pre-war tech because they believe humanity can't be trusted to handle it unrestricted or someone will cause another apocalypse. It's safer under their control. They gained power quickly but collapsed over time because they couldn't adapt. Then in Fallout 3, they arrive in force with no explanation of how they got there and at strength, or why the DC area was a wasteland when the West Coast was in full nation building. And this Brotherhood of Steel wasn't a morally neutral xenophobic faction, they were unequivocally the good guys. In Fallout 4, they arrive in force, with a flimsy explanation, scavenged and jerry-rigged tech, no nation building, to a wasteland that never reached nation building status because the Institute prevented it, which is a fucking rabbit hole. This Brotherhood of Steel are something of an overcorrection where they hate mutants and synths and everything else. Then in Fallout TV show, they arrive in force, again, have maybe 50 recruits in the desert with clean clothes, food, water, but no cities, farms, factories to provide those things. They are a religious cult with clerics, rituals, and altars, but everybody is incompetent. Bethesda's Brotherhood of Steel is schizophrenic, the only through lines being they will arrive in force with no nation building to invade a wasteland. In this case, it really looks like the West Coast factions were stomped on to allow the Brotherhood of Steel to invade another wasteland. Elephant in the room, the nuke. I normally assume death of the author, but this time let's assume my timeline was correct, and Fallout New Vegas is canon. Shady Sands was destroyed just months after the events of New Vegas. That means whatever choices you made in New Vegas are overshadowed and belittled by the destruction of the largest faction in the West Coast, maybe the world. The NCR at this point had major problems in their economy, their politics, their resources, but they were still a full civilization of many cities and allied factions. If Shady Sands got wiped out, the Republic would likely break, but the cities would remain, maybe downsize but not disappear. The territory should look more Wild West than Mad Max. The heart of the NCR getting nuked by Vault Tech, a faction that previously had no power outside of their isolated bunkers, if they still had power in those vaults, is a force made out of nowhere to erase a faction built up over 3 games. And it all happened off-screen. The location of Shady Sands was moved from the middle of nowhere to downtown LA right next to a vault. The whole point of Shady Sands and the NCR is that it was New World civilization, not dependent on the old world, not settled around a vault. The commie bitch, a pre-war genius trying to save the world, appears in Shady Sands before the nuke as the same age, becomes a messiah figure to the survivors, leads what's left of the NCR, and creates cold fusion. They used one out of nowhere to destroy everything, just for another out of nowhere to save the world better than ever before, and they destroyed the West Coast to do it. I think I've said enough. With the duct tape plot, mouth-breathing characters, and disrespect for prior works, you can see why the ending shot of the New Vegas Strip made people upset. They are continuing their destruction.